out! Which means that it's time for that cyclical conversation of new book Sanderson hype and Sanderson is so overrated. So I figured it was a good time to look at some of Sanderson's strengths, some of his often cited weaknesses, and try to answer the question, why is he so popular? First, context. Brandon Sanderson is a massively popular modern fantasy author with over 40 books and short stories written and over 20 million books sold, with an incredibly loyal fan base that have assigned him with the much coveted GOAT title. But with his massive success and praise, there's also those that have been forced to read his books at gunpoint by their friends, and after reading 3 or 4 of his books, they're left wondering, what's so great about him? One of the things that Sanderson is well known for by his fans as well as his critics is his world building. Some advice that Sanderson often gives when speaking about world building is to pick a few core things to really dig into and explore deeply within the world, and then find a way to interconnect those deeply explored things with the smaller elements of the world so that it all feels connected and intentional. And he's really good at doing that method of world building. When you read a Sanderson book, every element of the world that he deeply explores is important to the story. It's something that's going to matter in the story. It's something intentional. And when he explores something in the world, you know to listen. With that, he's really good at interconnecting magic into the world so that it feels like the world and the magic were formed together. It feels like the world is shaped in response to the presence of magic. He's really good at weaving mysteries within the world, so that as you learn more about the world, you're also exploring the mysteries that lie within it and building up those mysteries and giving them payoff at just the right time. He also loves really extensive, big worlds that are interconnected in a wider way, not just within the story, but the story's the Cosmere. And he's good at doing that in a way that doesn't force the reader to engage in that side of things as well. If you like to geek over the intricacies of the world and the mechanics of how it all works, and you want to know about characters that can hop from one world to another and where they appear in other stories, which I think all of these things are going to become more and more relevant in the future, but at least as of right now, he's really good at creating those mysteries in the wider Cosmere and how the books are interconnected, and treating them, at least at the moment, treating them more as Easter eggs than as essential knowledge. So if you're into digging into all that, uncovering those mysteries, finding the people that have changed their names, but they're actually from that book and they've just world hopped over here, or the way the different worlds are connecting and all that, if you're into that, it's there, and it's there for you to dig up and discover and discuss with other fans. If you're not so into that, you really don't lose anything by not seeking that knowledge out. You can still enjoy the series as self-contained series without needing to mess with all the wider interconnectivity, because there's plenty of interconnectivity within the series isolated on their own. Sanderson thrives in creating intentional, interconnected worlds where everything is there for a purpose and relevant, and his fans love him for that. But in that strength also lies the weakness that a lot of people cite, and that's lack of immersion and lack of livability. Because his world building is so intentional, and because he focuses on the things that matter the most and building those the most deeply, that can make his worlds feel a little bit less immersive. As a reader who is a very immersive reader, I want my worlds to feel alive, living, breathing, like they're bigger than the pages of the book. When I entered the story, the world had already been living and growing and moving before me, and when I run out of pages, it'll keep living on. I love feeling like I've stepped into a world and like I'm engaging with just a piece of it, but that the world is so much bigger and more unknowable than I could ever get out of just this one story. I love that feeling. And that's not the kind of world building that Sanderson does. He does intentional world building where what you are given is what you need to know within the world. That brings on a lot of criticisms that his worlds don't really feel lived in. It feels like when we started reading the story is when the world started moving. And it also makes his worlds, in my opinion, a lot harder to visualize. I don't really feel like his worlds are vivid. I think they're very clever and fun to hang out in, but I don't feel like I'm stepping into a world. He intentionally builds his worlds this way, with this intentional, thoughtful, I build up what you need for the story, and then the rest is all connected together so that it feels real, but it oftentimes doesn't feel like it's breathing beyond the story. And he does that on purpose. He does that because he has a purposeful way that he does world building. I just happen to like the other way. Like, I connect with the other type of world building, the more visual, it's bigger than me. I'm gonna learn about stuff that doesn't matter to the plot because I'm just exploring this world for a while. I dig that. So essentially, from a world building perspective, if you like the intentionality, interconnectivity, everything matters, everything's here for a reason type of world building, then like, he's perfect. But if you as a reader prefer a more immersive, living, breathing world where the world is as important as the story itself, Sanderson's, his type of world building just doesn't suit for that type of reader. But also his type of world building really helps with pacing because he's constantly keeping the story moving. He's giving those drops of knowledge of world building that are relevant to the narrative, to the story as you need them or before you'll need them, but it's not meandering. It's not just exploring the world for the sake of exploring the world. And that makes his books compulsively readable because they're moving, they're constantly moving. Now let's talk about magic systems, because this is often cited as one of his greatest assets as a writer, and I do strongly agree with that. He makes these really fun, unique magic systems that are very complex, extremely understandable. He has really creative ideas for magic, how they work with people and how they work within the world. And he does a good job of making them so mechanical, so scientific feeling that we are able to imagine them in our everyday life. My dad, who has the worst memory in the world and typically can read a book, talk to me about it, and then forget it and never be able to talk to me about it again unless he rereads. And even though that's true about him, he will regularly talk about how he just wants to throw a coin on the ground and push off of it and shoot into the air because it's so fun and visual and easy to imagine how you could apply it in your everyday life. But he also does a great job, like I said before, in incorporating the magic into the world and not using magic as a way out. We rarely ever, if ever, I can't think of any off of the top of my head, come across a scenario where it's like, we're in trouble, but magic. Now, magic oftentimes gets us out of trouble, but in a clever way. He makes sure that we understand the magic well enough that we can problem solve with the characters. We can think, how can I use this magic in a way that's unique to this situation to help me get out of this situation? Not in a Deus Ex Machina kind of way, but in a scientific, I'm figuring out how to use this thing in a strategic way that helps me overcome my barriers kind of way, which is fun and interactive for the reader because it makes the magic system feel more attainable, more real, more understandable, but also he intentionally writes his magic and writes his solutions in a way so that the reader can figure it out alongside the characters. We can find the solution, we can figure it out right before the character does so that we go, aha, and then the character goes, aha, and then together we move. I don't really see a lot of criticism around magic systems. Even people that aren't Sanderson fans, I feel like a lot of people still acknowledge, like, yeah, he does magic well. Some criticisms that I often see are that he's way too repetitive with how he explains the magic. Like, book 3 of Mistborn, he's still giving refreshers on the basics of the magic system, which I can understand that being kind of annoying. I kind of appreciate it because I have a bad memory and it's nice to get little refreshers. So since that section, the magic system section, is far more praise and not so balanced with criticisms, let's move on to something that is very oftentimes criticized, his prose. Now, Sanderson says that he goes for invisible prose. He's not trying to write flowery descriptions. He isn't looking to do a lot of metaphors. He isn't trying to say something with his prose. He's just trying to deliver the story. He does it in a very matter-of-fact way. It's not pretty, but it's not necessarily bad. It just is. It's just a vehicle to get the story to you, and that's intentional. He wants to do that. A lot of people would argue that his prose isn't invisible, and in fact is very notable. The things I oftentimes see cited when discussing this is that he does a lot of telling and not showing, or that he's so on the nose with how he presents information that it feels like he's telling the readers what's going on rather than letting it be something that we're experiencing through the characters or through revelations of the world, which I think is a fair criticism, because Sanderson's writing style is very much like presenting information, and I think he's amazing at hiding mysteries within the story, giving little clues of what the reveal is going to be, giving little clues of it throughout the story so that it's breadcrumbs, so that when the reveal happens, you're like, oh my goodness, I know, that makes sense because of this, this, and this, I just didn't put it together. He's so good at that. But regardless of him being good at hiding mysteries in the story, because his writing style is, here's the information you need about the room, here's the information you need about the character, because his writing style is invisible, that does sometimes mean that he's presenting information so on the nose, so just right there, that I can understand that feeling the opposite of invisible. It can feel like, stop telling me what a character is feeling. Show me through the character. I've actually been known to gripe about Sanderson's prose in the past, and I personally, while I understand the criticism of his prose about him being on the nose, about him kind of just like presenting situations and therefore not exploring certain things to the extent that readers would want, blah, blah, blah. None of that stuff actually bothers me at all. For me, it's all about structure. I think he has a very repetitive prose structure, and that irritates me, but like, that's a me problem. So I'm not gonna dig into that in this video. Okay, we did prose and we mentioned characters in that, so now let's dig into characters. Sanderson loves to explore a wide range of characters and the things that make them tick, the things that they're struggling with, the things that they are working through, and the essential pieces of what makes their character arc. He writes teen characters and their personal struggles as they work through their identity and their place in the world. He writes adults that are dealing with parenthood, with loss and grief, with depressions, anxieties, figuring out their role in parenthood, in leadership, as a spouse. He has a wide range of topics that he explores within his characters so that each character's individual struggle, journey, arc is unique to them. One of Sanderson's strengths in doing this is that he digs into, it's kind of like how he writes world building, really. He picks the essential things that he wants to dig into, and he goes deep with that thing and then interconnects the smaller things. Yeah, he does his character work very similarly to his world building, now that I think of it. And that means that whatever this character is going through in their personal journey, he goes for it. If a character has just experienced loss, someone that he loved has just died, the grief becomes consuming for him. And Sanderson digs into that grief and explores it to the nth degree. Same for anxiety, same for depression, same for PTSD. When there's a a thing that has rocked a character's world, he digs and digs and digs into it. This makes the characters feel extremely relatable, especially to readers who have experienced similar things in their lives. As this character struggles and struggles and struggles through a thing, the reader, if we have struggled and struggled and struggled through that thing, too, we really connect with that character. One criticism to Sanderson's character work that I oftentimes see is that they are very one note. They have a few traits assigned to them as a character, and then those few traits are all encompassing. And that can feel relatable because, quite frankly, when you are in the pits of despair or the pits of grief or the pits of whatever, it does feel all encompassing. It does feel like it's taken over your entire life, identity, personality, all of you. Everything. It's rough. But if you don't relate to that character, or if you're not into that kind of character work where the character's being consumed by a thing, yeah, I can understand how it can feel like, is the character just their depression? Is the character only their grief? Yeah, maybe they are in this moment. But once again, you'll be noticing a pattern in this video at this point, is that Sanderson's strengths in his character writing, how he really just deeply explores the personal turmoil that the character is facing in the midst of their character arc. It's so deeply explored that the reader can just latch onto that character. But that also can be a weakness in a lot of readers' eyes, because it can make a character feel one note, that this is all consuming, that that's all the character is anymore. Which I think is a valid criticism. It's a valid thing not to like about a person's writing. It's a valid thing to like. It is what it is. Then you have the third act. I'm gonna hit this one quickly because, again, it's an often cited thing, and frankly, I just think I love the way Sanderson handles his third acts. He has said in many of his lectures and many of his writing, and when he talks about creating a story, that he writes backwards almost, or he plots backwards. He says that he usually has these epic scenes and developments and climaxes in his mind first, and then he goes backwards, he backs up and finds how it all leads to there. Which means that his stories have these slow build with breadcrumbs sprinkled all throughout them, and then it just builds and builds and builds, and you get this ending, this third act that he intentionally makes so that the reveals just hit one after another. Boom, boom, boom. And it's so fun. That's why he's credited with the term a Sanderlanche of an ending. I've already kind of mentioned it earlier in the video, but it's these breadcrumbs, you know? It's just like you get the reveals, you get the big aha moment where it all comes together and you're like, oh, it was all there. Maybe you figured out some of it along with him because he left the clues for you to find, but some of it you probably didn't, and you look back and you're like, there it was there the whole time, and I love it. I love it. But there is the criticism that his books feel formulaic, because you know what you're gonna get. You know you're gonna get a slow build with clues hidden throughout it, and then the big giant climax where everything's gonna be revealed all at once, and you're gonna have the epic action and all of that, which, by the way, Sanderson's also really great at writing really good action. And then you get the falling action in the close of the book, and it's like, it almost ruins tension for some people, because it's like, I know the pattern, I know the structure of how this book is going to unfold, and that, you know, this doesn't suit everybody. I tend to like it, but it is a valid criticism. I also hate patterns and formulas. When I feel like I can see a distinct pattern that an author repeatedly uses, I die a little bit inside. And I see that sometimes for Sanderson, so I understand that criticism. I just like it more than I hate it in this particular instance. Anyway, we could go on about strengths, weaknesses, things. I think I hit on the most commonly cited ones. So now that will lead us to the next section of this video, which is, so what is it that makes him so popular? Because as I've stated throughout this video, I think most of the criticisms that Sanderson gets, when they're explained, and they're not just like Sanderson's mid, when they're actually explained and explored what the things that they think he doesn't do as well, I think that they're really valid. I think it's valid criticisms. So what is it as an author that does have, you know, weaknesses? What is it that makes him so popular, so mainstream? Despite not having any adaptations yet, his name is in mouths of people who are not deeply entrenched in the reading world. So I have in my opinion, there are 3 things that make him so popular. 1, accessibility as a reader. His books are compulsively readable because he's able to create these very complex magic systems and worlds that are very interconnected in a way that is easy to understand and easy to move alongside with. It's just really accessible. Now, you'll oftentimes get people that will say he does it in a shallower way than other series that they might note. I would say that he does it in a more accessible way, which is not a negative, it's just not what everybody wants. He's an easy transition from YA for readers who oftentimes are exclusively reading young adult fantasy and then they dive into Sanderson. He's the gateway into adult fantasy for a lot of young readers because he makes adult fantasy feel more accessible than a lot of other authors do. That's not a positive or a negative, it's just a thing. It's just a thing. Same for making high fantasy and hard magic systems feel more accessible. He just has a way of presenting things in a really easy to understand and easy to step into way. So he's compulsively readable, easily accessible, but he also digs deeper. Now, again, there are people that will argue that, yeah, he digs deeper, but other people dig deeper than him. And yeah, sure, why not? But the thing is that Sanderson is so accessible and fits so well into a wider range of audience while also being very unique, while also offering more. He does create really unique, interesting worlds and magic system. He is a skilled writer of fight scenes, of mysteries, of building to a climax and making that climax pay off. There's so many things that I've already cited and could continue to cite that he writes extremely well. So he is easy to fit into mainstream while also providing so much more, while also providing a lot of things that pay off really, really well and that do a lot of stuff that mainstream media and books and that don't often do. Still trying to keep it spoiler free here, so I'm not providing specific examples, but I think you can fill in the gaps. He has that accessibility, but also the complexity, but also the uniqueness. And all those three things together is what turns a lot of people off because a lot of people want him to go deeper. They want him to go darker. They want him to explore certain things more. But it's an intentional choice for him to do exactly what he does, and it works for a lot of people. And I think the balance that he hits with all these things is exactly what makes him work so much to fit such a wide range of people. As well as his ability, what I mentioned before, of giving more, like the world hopping elements, like the Cosmere connections, all that, giving more in a way that you can dig into that if you want to, or you can leave it alone if you want to. And either way, it works within the story. It's a specific skill. Point number 2, and I'll move through my other points a little bit faster, he's accessible as a person. Before he was a major author, before he had as much success as he did, he was really active on the fantasy subreddit, or on the fantasy subreddit and the Sanderson subreddit. I'm not on Reddit, but that's what I've heard. He was interacting with fans on a regular basis, answering questions, and really listening to what people were saying. As he's gotten a lot bigger, he's adapted so that he can remain accessible in a way that is sustainable. He's created a YouTube channel where he regularly live streams and responds to comments from people, responds to things that people say in the stream. And he also invests in writers a lot. He teaches college courses on writing, world building, magic systems, all the things, and he puts those up on YouTube for free. He and his friends also started the Writing Excuses podcast, which he's less involved in now, but he was a part of the beginnings of and was very, very active in, and even won a Hugo Award. He sets goals for himself to be able to complete his books, the writing and the editing portions of his books, and deadlines for getting the book out there, and he clearly communicates those goals and how he's doing on those deadlines on his website with regular updates and even trackers to let people know what the progress level is on the projects that he's working on. And he meets those deadlines. Every now and then he has to push a project back, but if he does, he has a reason and he communicates it with his fans. His accessibility, his communication, his what seems like genuine care for his readership is a part of what makes his fan base so loyal. Which brings me to point number 3, which is consistency. He is constantly publishing. He is constantly putting out more books. He is far outpacing most other authors, which constantly keeps his name in people's mouths and keeps the hype meter high at all times. And I think that that consistency, which is unattainable for most authors, and other authors should not be expected to do exactly what Sanderson is doing, but the fact that he enjoys publishing as much that as he does, the fact that he can just spit out books like he does, I think is a big factor in his popularity because, like I said, his name is always in people's mouths. He is constantly publishing, so his name is constantly coming up. Plus, it's the way he does it. He's a self-described showman. He has secret projects. The big secret project that everybody learned about that went viral recently is one notable one, but he's always been doing stuff like this where he's like, surprise! This series that I said was a standalone is now a series, and I wrote the book, and you'll have it soon. He has these elaborate ideas of how to showcase things about projects to make the books just a little bit more exciting. Merch and trinkets and special editions and things that he really, really enjoys coming up with and working on. And he's built a team around him that when he has these elaborate, ridiculous ideas, they just say, okay, let's make it happen. All these things keep him relevant, and the fact that he consistently delivers on these things and has proven himself to be reliable all factor in his fame as well. If you've watched my videos for any amount of time, you probably know that I am a big fan of Sanderson. I have a shelf dedicated to his books, and that's not even all of them because I'm currently lending out some of my books to one of my nieces. He's not my favorite author, but he is on my favorite authors list. I haven't read all of his books, but he is my most read author. I've read a lot of them. Because I pick up most of his books, and I am a big fan of his, but I don't jive with everything about his writing style and storytelling style, I figured I just wanted to make this video, not criticizing him, not defending him, just kind of talking about what are his strengths, what are his weaknesses, and what is it about him that makes him fit so well as a mainstream author, but also standing out in that space. There are other authors that I personally connect with more than Sanderson, and there are other authors that I jive with a little bit better than Sanderson, but I mean, I'm still a really big fan of his work. I still enjoy absolutely everything that I pick up by him. And I think it's really cool that we have a modern day fantasy author that I can wear a bookish t-shirt to a grocery store and a guy can stop me and say, hey, I've had a book hangover recently. The shirt said book hangover. And I said, cool, what'd you read? And he goes, oh, it was this author, Brandon Sanderson. And as I talk to this guy more, he's not a big reader. He just got recommended the books. And I just think that that's cool. I think it's neat that he's saturated the world so much that he's just someone that people know, even before getting his adaptations. I don't know. I'm proud to be a fantasy reader. I think it's neat, and I think it's interesting what it is about him that makes him fit so well in that space. Like I said, this is a cyclical discussion. It comes around Sanderson hype and Sanderson is overrated. This comes around every time there's a new book out, and I'm not on Reddit, but as I was researching for this video, all Googles led to Reddit. So if you're on Reddit, you've heard this discussion before a lot. But I would love to continue the discussion. It would be very interesting to me to continue to hear if you're a big fan of Sanderson, if you happen to love his work, what is it about his work that just really makes him stand out for you as a reader? And if you're not as big of a fan, what is it about him what are the weaknesses that you see that maybe weren't discussed as much in this video and you'd like to dig into a little bit more? If you made it to the end of the video and you are a Sanderson fan, I I have the lost medal in my possession, not at the time that I'm filming this, but at the time you're seeing this, and I'm so excited. And I will be having a discussion on the book, a spoiler-filled discussion with some of my friends over on my second channel, so check the description for my second channel. That video comes out on Tuesday, and I'm so excited. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on the second channel. I'll see you again soon. Bye.